Please welcome to the stage Hirsch Kroner, CEO of ECAP.
Welcome, everybody, to ECAP 2024. Thank you, everybody, for joining. So many familiar faces, and I'm so happy to see so many new ones tonight. It is important for ECAP to continuously evolve, grow, and adapt to meet the needs of our attendees and our sponsors. It's easy to get stuck doing the same thing year after year. But at ECAP, we are committed to ensuring that each of our events are better each and every year. I hope everyone has noticed and appreciated some of the changes this year at ECAP, such as the state-specific breakout with the ACA state executives, the Emerald Lounge featuring an upgraded coffee station in the main networking room, thank you, Aploy, and the Crystal Lounge, which offers additional afternoon networking space. I hope you have been able to take advantage of some of these exciting new additions. We continue to make sure that ECAP is a leader in the SNF space. To that end, I want to thank the members of our executive committee, Amy Heller, Alex Barth, Alan Chavez, Bluma Bronner, Jeremy Stroyman, Ellie Davis, Barry Monk, Gary Klein, Scott Pilgrim, Mike Beal, Alan Litt, and Effie Nussbaum. This distinguished team and group has guided and enhanced many of the visions and ideas that we have had, and I look forward to continuing to work with them in shaping the future of ECAP. Speaking of future, I would be remiss to not plug our ECAP West Summit, being held June 17th to 19th in Scottsdale, Arizona. I hope to see you there. I'd also like to thank Meridian Capital, a strong supporter of ECAP, who's been there from the beginning, and the sponsor of tonight's Gala Dinner. Thank you, Ari, Josh, and the entire Meridian team. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and now I'd like to introduce Ari Adlerstein.
Turn it up.
That sounds like a celebrity coming to the stage. It's not me. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 ECAP Gala Dinner. It is my pleasure, along with my partner Josh Simpson and the entire Meridian Capital Healthcare team, to host you tonight as the sponsor of this amazing gathering that has become an annual tradition. The hearts of many in this room are heavy with thoughts of October 7th, and I would be remiss to begin my remarks this evening without acknowledging the horrible atrocities of the day and the weeks after. I would like to ask everyone to please take a moment of silence to honor the victims of the war in Israel. Looking around the room, it is great to see so many close friends in attendance tonight. including our treasured clients and lenders. I would like to thank Hershey and the entire ECAP team for once again putting together an unbelievable conference, which somehow seems only to get bigger and better year after year. I think we're running out of space in the dining room. Yeah. We are gathered here tonight amid an extremely tenuous time in the world. We have an upcoming volatile presidential election in the United States, social unrest around the world, threatening actions from major countries like Russia and China, sky-high equity markets here in the States, super hot fixed income markets, a Fed that seems committed to keeping us stable, and winners and losers across the real estate universe. In our industry, we continue to see a shifting landscape with immense opportunity, especially for those able to adapt to the times, including an ever-evolving lending landscape. I would like to thank my team, as well as every client and partner in the room for helping to make 2023 one of the most successful years the Meridian Healthcare team has had since I founded this platform 13 years ago. We closed over $5 billion in transaction volume across 137 deals with 46 unique lenders in 42 states. Thank you all for your continued confidence and trust. We at Meridian remain bullish, not just because we are optimists by nature. We are bullish because we have seen that with every dynamic market comes unbelievable new opportunity, new client relationships, new deal structures, and new solutions on behalf of ourselves and our clients. I recently came across an amazing quote that encapsulates this mentality perfectly, which goes like this: winners focus on winning, losers focus on winners. We are all blessed to be here tonight, and I look forward to working with so many of you in 2024 to uncover new attractive and profitable opportunities. I'm thrilled to announce that we have a very special guest here with us tonight. He is one of the most accomplished legal minds in our country's history, known for his brilliance, tenacity in the courtroom, and unwavering commitment to justice. Professor Alan Dershowitz has been a key player in some of the most high-profile cases in recent history, having argued cases in front of the Supreme Court and represented clients such as Mike Tyson, Leona Helmsley, O.J. Simpson, and Donald Trump. He is also a prolific author and commentator, and his influence extends far beyond the confines of the legal profession. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Professor Alan Dershowitz.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this wonderful gathering. Such a friendly bunch of people. I think I've met half the people here already. Many of them have taken pictures with me, and I really, really appreciate your welcoming me here tonight. This organization, in so many different ways, does so much good for the world, and particularly for the aging population in the world. As somebody who is part of that aging population, I want to thank you very, very much. We also live at a time when aging people are very much in the news. They're both of them running for president. And somebody had said that no matter who wins, it's really possible the White House may have to turn into some kind of a nursing home over the next 4 years. So be ready for that. But I'm not going to talk about politics tonight. I'm not an expert on who's going to win the election. But I'll tell you what I will talk about, and it will have an impact on the election. This election is going to be determined more than any election in prior history by courts. By courts. By the Supreme Court, by circuit courts, by district courts, by courts in New York, by courts in Georgia, by courts in Florida. And that's a tragedy. That is really a tragedy. Elections should not be decided by judges. You know, when the framers of the Constitution wrote Article 3 of the Constitution, which dealt with the judicial branch, Alexander Hamilton said the judicial branch is the least dangerous branch because it has neither sword nor purse, and it only can operate through its own judgments and its own integrity. And yet the judiciary has assumed a gigantic role in American life, in American law, and now, for the first time, really, in modern times, certainly the first time since Bush versus Gore in 2000, where they played a very important role in determining the outcome of the election. In this case, they're going to play a major role in who can run, in whether or not the names of candidates will appear on ballots in every state. We have a case now pending in the United States Supreme Court where Georgia, followed by Maine, has tried to take the Republican candidate for president, he will be the Republican candidate, off the ballot. I think the Supreme Court will reverse that conviction, either 9-0 or 8-1. But nonetheless, it shouldn't be before a court. The 14th Amendment was not intended to prevent people from running for office. It applied to people who fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War, and I know that Donald Trump's an old man, but he didn't fight for the Confederacy, and neither did his opponent. But there are many other cases today that are pending, and that can have a big impact on the election. The polls show that although the bases of both parties won't be affected by the outcome of cases, the middle, center voters, independent voters, may very well be influenced by whether or not there's a conviction of Donald Trump, or there could have been, before the recent Her report, a possible conviction of Joe Biden for possession of classified material. I don't think there will be a conviction before the trial, but I think it's possible. I think it's absolutely possible that you could have a down and dirty conviction of a candidate which would be reversed on appeal, but only after the election was over, when it would be too late to influence the outcome of the election. So I want to spend just a minute going over each of the deeply, deeply flawed cases that are currently pending against the Republican potential nominee for president. The first case grows out of New York City, in which the district attorney essentially campaigned. He campaigned on the promise of getting Trump. I wrote a book about it. I stole the title from him. The name of the book is Get Trump, and the book analyzes all four of the cases against Trump. The one in New York is the weakest case. I'll go over it with you for just 1 second in case you don't know. What happened in New York is that Donald Trump settled a case with a woman who had accused him of an improper sexual relationship. And he settled it with a confidentiality clause, as many cases of this kind are settled. But the New York District Attorney indicted him for failing to disclose that settlement in a corporate form. Now, in all of our history of the United States, we've had thousands of cases of settlements of this kind, and there's never been a situation where anybody ever disclosed the settlement on a corporate form. My God, Alexander Hamilton settled a case against him back when he was Secretary of the Treasury. This is a completely made-up case, but it's being tried in New York. And in New York, where 90% of the people voted essentially in this district against Trump, the likelihood of a fair trial is very, very, very difficult to see. The second case is in Florida, and the Florida case involves a clear case of guilt, but it's not a smoking gun, it's a smoking cigarette butt. What do I mean by that? What happened is Donald Trump, he's a show-off, we know that. He was speaking to a journalist, and he took out a piece of paper, and he said, "See this piece of paper? It's classified. I could have declassified it when I was president, but I didn't. It's still secret," and he waved it in front of him. That is illegal, but it's a minor, minor crime, so I call it a cigarette butt. And whether that case goes forward or not, nobody knows for sure, because We then have the Hur report. The Hur report, which came out just a couple of days ago, said that President Biden couldn't be prosecuted for what is essentially the same alleged crime, possession of classified material. But the report went further and said the reason he can't be prosecuted is because he's an old man with a bad memory. And that obviously was intended and clearly has an impact on his capacity to run for office and on people's perception of whether or not he is really qualified as the result of, he's going to be, what, 85, 86 years old when he finishes this term. And that would be the oldest president in history. Indeed, both of the presidents, people running for president, the former president and the current president, are older than anybody in history has ever been. So they decided not to prosecute Biden, and I think that will have a big impact on the Florida case. It's very hard to distinguish those cases. The special prosecutor went further and said, well, remember that Biden cooperated and Trump didn't, but under our Constitution, you have no obligation to cooperate. We have the Fifth Amendment, which protects privacy. You don't have to cooperate. If you want to cooperate, fine, make a deal with the government, get something in exchange. But you should not be prosecuted because you didn't cooperate. So there's that case. And then there's the case that is obviously in the news these days involving Fani Willis, the district attorney of Fulton County in Georgia. Here's a prosecutor who has the biggest case of her life, the biggest case in the history of Fulton County. She's prosecuting the President of the United States and 18 other people for trying to improperly influence the outcome of the election and this is important to note, and for lying on judicial forms, for not telling the truth. And who does she hire to be her special prosecutor but her boyfriend, a guy who she is friendly with and then develops a sexual relationship with. Now, she's denied under oath and he's denied under oath that they had any kind of a sexual romantic relationship before the hiring was done. But there's a witness who says no, that in fact their relationship began earlier. If that relationship did begin earlier and they lied under oath, the trial may not be against Donald Trump. It may end up being against Fani Willis and her boyfriend for committing perjury. The irony of being prosecuted by somebody who's alleged to have committed the same crime you've committed is too much to escape the notice of the judiciary. So the one case that really has a chance of convicting Donald Trump is the D.C. case. I appreciate it. Thank you. And that's a serious case, and that case is now pending before the Supreme Court just today, with the Supreme Court laid out a time frame for when that case can be argued, if it's going to be argued in front of the Supreme Court. And so what we have is a handful of cases in front of judges, argued by lawyers, some better than others, that may influence the outcome of this election. The other thing that may influence the outcome of this election is exactly what the wonderful man who just introduced me, talked about, and that is the October 7th war. I also wrote a book about that. I started writing the book on October 7th, the day the massacres occurred. I finished it within a month, and it was published within 2 months. Now, how does a war in Gaza, thank you. How does a war in Gaza influence an election in the United States? Well, for this reason. There are many people on the hard left, particularly the hard left of the Democratic Party, who are very upset at President Biden's support for Israel, including one senator who today called Israel's actions a war crime, which shows he knows nothing about either war or crimes of the law, but he knows what his constituents want. And what we may see is a push within the Democratic Party to push President Biden away from supporting Israel. If that were to happen, I think Biden would lose the middle, the center, and would, in fact, I think, suffer electoral defeat. The vast majority of Americans support Israel, as they well should, because the attack of October 7th the barbarous attack of October 7th was not only an attack on Israeli civilians, it was an attack on Western values, on the Judeo-Christian tradition. It was an attack on decency. It was an attack on civilization. And I think most Americans realize that. And they also realize that the high death toll in Gaza is largely a function of the fact that Hamas very deliberately hides its weapons of war, its rockets, its generals, its leaders, hides them among civilians, and basically dares Israel and says, look, we're going to send a rocket from this mosque or from this school or from this UN facility, and you have two choices. If you fire back, the world will condemn you for killing civilians, and if you don't fire back, we'll continue to kill your civilians. It's an impossible situation to be in, and Israel has handled it with extreme concern for the rights of civilians. In fact, never in the history of urban warfare has a country killed fewer civilians in proportion to the combatants that it has killed. The ratio is less than 2 to 1. The average ratio in wars of this kind is 10 to 1. That is 10 civilians are killed for every combatant that's killed. And in Israel, the ratio is approximately 1.8 or 1.7, depending on how you count, to 1. No country in the history of warfare has ever faced comparable situations with a greater concern for human rights, a greater concern for the rights of civilians, and a greater concern for the rule of law. But you wouldn't know that if you read the New York Times. You wouldn't know that if you listened to CNN. You would think that Israel is the worst offender. You certainly wouldn't know that if you went to Harvard University or Columbia University or Yale University. I can't boo Harvard because I taught there for 50 years, but I can tell you that I am ashamed as to what happened at places like Harvard. And this is something that all Americans have a stake in. I look out at the audience here and I see one of the best students I had in my 50 years is one of you, Elie Schwab. And he's a phenomenal student who came to Harvard with a yeshiva background and just became one of the best students there was. So how did he accomplish what he accomplished? He accomplished what he accomplished the way all of you in this room have accomplished it. It's called meritocracy. It's called working hard. It's called playing by the rules. It's called investing properly. And it's called American free enterprise. And that's what's under attack today at American universities. You are under attack at American universities. Why? Because you have succeeded on the merits. You haven't succeeded because of identity politics, because of your race, because of your gender, because of your religion, because of anything other than your own hard work, your own determinations, and your own skills. And that's what's under attack today at American universities. And what's the mechanism of this attack is called diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. And what it does is, along with something called intersectionality, it divides the world into two groups, oppressors and oppressed. And if you're the oppressors, you can do nothing right. If you're the oppressed, you can do nothing wrong. And who are the oppressors? Jews, Catholics, Christians, white people, males. Who are the oppressed? The opposite of that. It doesn't matter how rich you are as an Arab, you're oppressed. It doesn't matter whether you're a homeless Jew, you're an oppressor. And that's the way it works at universities today. So the DEI program, diversity but not if you're Jewish. It doesn't matter how diverse you are. You don't count. as part of diversification. Equity. What is equity? Equity is the opposite of equality. Martin Luther King had a dream. I was there. I was actually at his dream in October of 1963. I was a law clerk, and I heard him say the great words, "I have a dream that someday my children will be judged, not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." That was our anthem. That's what we worked for. That's what we hoped for. And equity reverses that and says, no, do not judge people by the content of their character or by their hard work or by their grades or by anything else. Judge them by the color of their skin. Judge them by their identity politics. And equity is the opposite of equality. And inclusion, the Harvard plan of inclusion, explicitly excludes Jews and explicitly excludes Asians and explicitly excludes even Cubans, because these are people who have shown great success in the marketplace of ideas and in meritocracy. And the enemy of DEI is meritocracy. And so it's so important that all of us join in the fight to restore the American value, the open marketplace of ideas, the open marketplace of business, where success is determined by hard work, where success is determined by the ability to solve problems, where success is determined by providing services and resources, as you do, to people in need, developing institutions that meet the need. You know, 100 years ago, there wouldn't be such a session because there weren't old people. People died young. Today, there are a lot of elderly people, and they need the resources you have. And you in this room identified that and worked on it and spotted it and used your intellect and your ability to fill a need, and you have been rewarded for it. And that's the way American society should operate. You know, this is a story, I don't know if it's true or not, but a doctor in Boston from Beth Israel Hospital swears to me it was actually true. It involves an old man named Schwartz, who was in an old age home in the Boston area, a good one, very good one. And he had a heart attack, God forbid. And he was immediately taken to Massachusetts General Hospital, one of the oldest hospitals in the United States, a very distinguished hospital. It's a hospital that didn't specialize in having, in the old days at least, Jewish doctors or Italian doctors or Irish doctors. Almost all of them were Brahmin doctors. But it was a very, very good hospital. Schwartz stays in Massachusetts General for about 3 days. He gets stabilized, and then he says to his doctor, "Doctor, I want to change the hospital. I want to move to Beth Israel Hospital, the Jewish hospital a mile from here." And the doctors all say to him, but you know, this is a much better hospital. He says, "No, I want to go to Beth Israel Hospital. I want to go to Beth Israel Hospital." So they take him to Beth Israel Hospital. And the intern in Beth Israel Hospital says to him, "So you agree with us here that the medical care in Massachusetts General is not what it's cracked up to be. It's not that good." And Schwartz says, No, it's good. I can't complain. He said, "Then it must be the nurses." No, the nurses were wonderful. I can't complain. "Is it the food?" No, the food's great. I can't complain. So they say to him, "Schwartz, then why did you move to this hospital?" He said, "Simple. Here, I can complain." And so that's what we all have the right to do. It's part of our First Amendment. We have the right to complain. And I'm here tonight to complain. I'm complaining about the direction into which America is falling. We are losing our superiority as a nation based on industry, based on merit, based on accomplishments. We are giving it up. We are losing our great universities. We are losing everything to social programs that really have very little to do with education. A lot of my friends' children are no longer going to elite universities. They're now going to specialized places that teach computer, that teach economics, that teach things that are narrower and less subject to the kind of manipulation that we see today in many places. So people ask me all the time, Are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? And I always respond by saying that in Israel, they have a definition. There, they say a pessimist. A pessimist is somebody who says, oy vey, things are so bad, they can't possibly get any worse. The optimist says, yes, they can. So I am partly optimist, partly pessimist. I see the direction of the world, a world that has benefited me, a world that I love, a world that has given me a great family and great children and great friends. I see the world declining, and that makes me a pessimist. But then I see people like you. I meet you, and I say hello to you, and we talk and we schmooze. And that makes me an optimist. That makes me somebody who believes that we can confront this evil. We can turn it around. We can make America the same country it used to be when I was a kid. It was never perfect. It was never perfect. It always had discrimination. I'll tell you a story about it. And it's a story that may sound very self-serving, and it is self-serving, but it makes the point. I went to yeshiva as a kid, and I was a terrible, terrible student. I did not get along very well with the rabbis. Why? Because I was a creative kid, and I would always ask hard questions. And the rabbis would say, if the question was such a good one, the rabbis before you, who were so much smarter than you, would have asked it first. And if the rabbis who were so much smarter than you didn't ask it, it's not such a good question. It's a klutz kasha. And so I didn't get along very well in yeshiva. I finished 39th in my class out of 47. That means there were 8 people dumber than me, but I finished 39th. But then I went to Brooklyn College, and then I went to Yale Law School, and I worked my tail off. And I finished first in my class at Brooklyn College. I finished first in my class at Yale Law School. But nonetheless, I was turned down by 32 out of 32 Wall Street firms because they weren't hiring Jewish kids from Brooklyn whose parents and grandparents came from Poland. And we had to fight that, and we fought it, and we ended the discrimination against Jews. And the goal was to end discrimination. My hero growing up was Jackie Robinson. I was 10 years old when he came to the Brooklyn Dodgers, and all of us in Brooklyn had the same attitude. If Jackie Robinson can play second base for the Brooklyn Dodgers, we can accomplish anything we want. And I'm hoping someday that we will get back to a period of time where people, without looking at their identity, without looking in the mirror, can accomplish what they want to accomplish, have their dreams come true based on the American dream. So I thank you for helping us make the American dream, and I now want to ask you to ask me some hard questions. I know the first question goes to our chairman, and then all of you think of the hardest question, what you always wanted to ask me, what you think will embarrass me, and I'll answer it. Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor Dershowitz.
Okay.
I think I speak for everyone here. I have a very, very, very simple question, and I think you're expecting it. Did OJ do it?
Okay. This is not the first time I was asked that question. Let me tell you the first time I was asked that question. The question was, did OJ do it? So here's the first time I was asked that question. It was just months after the OJ trial. You know, he got acquitted by the jury. I was one of the lawyers in the case. And I was in Israel with my family writing a book called The Genesis of Justice. And my old friend called me, a guy I've known since 1970. His name was Benjamin Netanyahu. I met him when his name was Ben Natai, and he was a student in America. And he called me, and he said, hey, why don't you bring your wife and your daughter to the Prime Minister's office? We'll schmooze a little, we'll say hello, we'll take some pictures. He had just been elected Prime Minister literally that month. So I went to his office, and we take some pictures, and we schmooze, and we have some good reminiscences. And then he says, Alan, I need to take you into the little private room off the Prime Minister's office. The staff called it the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, where nobody could overhear anything. It was completely soundproof. And he said, there's a question I've always wanted to ask you. I thought he wanted to ask me about Iran or about a two-state solution. Puts his arm on my shoulder and he says, did OJ do it? And I said, Mr. Prime Minister, I have a question I've always wanted to ask you. Does Israel have nuclear weapons? And he said, Alan, you know I can't answer that question. And I said, Bibi, you know I can't answer that question. So I will give you the same answer I gave the Prime Minister of Israel. You're going to have to figure it out for yourself. Next question. Okay.
Do you believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob?
Well, it's an interesting question. Belief is not something you choose. Belief is something that happens to you. I'll tell you a story, and then you'll decide whether you think I've answered the question appropriately. This is a true story. It happened to me the day my oldest son was going to college. I took him by plane to the University of Colorado. I then got on the plane at Colorado, at Denver. The plane took off. It got up like 12,000 feet up, and the pilot used the word you never want to hear him say. We have a serious, serious problem. The landing, the flap on the wing won't go into a landing position. We're going to have to dump all the fuel, and we're going to have an emergency landing. The airport will be filled with foam. There will be fire engines, and we hope everybody will be safe. Everybody had to take their belts off. Women had to take off their high heel shoes. We had to put away our glasses, get into the brace position. And people all around did different things. I saw many Catholic people have their beads come out and play with their rosaries. I saw people of other faiths start praying. I did not pray. I didn't pray. It didn't occur to me whether to pray or not to pray. It just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. I didn't pray. I wrote letters to my children. I put the letters in a little box, my shaving kit, hoping it would survive. I was born to be skeptical. I'm skeptical about everything. I'm skeptical about God. I'm skeptical about evolution. I'm skeptical about atheism. I'm skeptical about truth. I'm skeptical about everything. And so, asking me whether I believe and I challenge. I've written 3 books about it. I wrote a book called The Genesis of Justice. I wrote a book about Abraham, and I've written many articles about Scripture, about the Bible. I believe in the Bible. Let me tell you, my Parsha, my Bar Mitzvah Sedra was Shoftim. I actually lane it every year. Shoftim v'shotrim titein lecha b'chol she'arecha. And I'll never forget the words. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. Everybody knows those words, but I have learned a new series of words. I've read this 100 times, but every time you read the Torah, you get a different interpretation and a different message out of it. And this time, when I read it for my 85th birthday, the words that came to me were the instructions to judges. And the judges get 2 instructions. Don't take bribes, that's easy. But the first instruction is, lo takir panim. Do not recognize faces. Do not do equity. Do not look at a person's race or gender or face. Do not say, like the Her Commission said, this person has a bad memory. Do single standard justice for all. So the answer to your great question is a complicated one, not one that I could check a box off, but thank you for asking. Next question. One more question, I'm told. One more question. It better be a good one.
Good evening, good evening. First of all, thank you, Alan. We appreciate you.
Thank you. I can't see you.
I'm
Where
right here,
are
I'm right
you?
here. All right, we have a couple questions for you here. Can you see me?
Okay.
Right here, Alan.
Yeah.
How are you? I'm right here on the chair. Right here. First of all, is it true that every single question we ask you is a billable hour for you. Are we going to get billed?
Say that.
Are we getting billed for these questions?
I'm not.
Is this a billable question? Next question.
Oh, no. Oh, the billable, you know the story about that. The guy.
Just trying to, this is a simple question, guys.
The client who comes to the lawyer and says, how much do you charge? And he says, I charge $1,000 for 3 questions. And the client says, well, isn't that a lot of money? And he says, yes. Now, what's your 3rd question? So, what's your question?
So, I mean, I was asked to ask you 2 questions.
Sure.
One's a very simple one. How often do you go out for dinner with Jeffrey Epstein?
How often was I out to dinner? Never.
No, like currently.
I never had dinner with Jeffrey Epstein in my life. I was his lawyer.
Is Jeffrey Epstein still alive, and does he go out to dinner with you on a weekly basis?
Yeah.
Just tell us, just between us, just me and you here.
See, that I could tell you because it wouldn't be covered. The lawyer-client privilege does not apply to conversations with dead people.
All right, more importantly, what yeshiva were you in?
I went to Brooklyn Talmudical Academy, Yeshiva University High School. It was on Bedford, President Street and Bedford Avenue, 4 blocks away from Ebbets Field. And we would get out usually at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I would run over to Ebbets Field and watch the last 1 or 2 innings of the game. So my yeshiva experience was a wonderful one. Let me tell you, I don't want to badmouth yeshivas at all. I learned a tremendous amount in yeshiva. I didn't learn it directly from the rabbis, but I learned how to study the sources myself. And I went back to it at an older age. And I have studied the sources. And I admire and revere the tradition, the religious traditions. I admire and revere the legal traditions. And as I used to tell my students at Harvard, if you have a yeshiva education or you had a Jesuit education, you're going to start out with a tremendous advantage over other law students. And so I wanted to just end by saying, I think this is a time for people to prioritize their resources, their energies, and their giving. I, for one, have decided, I'm 85 years old. One of the reasons, people ask me all the time, how come you look so good at 85? And I say, I'm trying my best to postpone having to go to one of your wonderful nursing homes. I don't know how long I'll be able to postpone it, but I'm trying my best. But thank you, I really want to thank you, because there is no greater mitzvah, no greater positive thing than, there's a Jewish prayer that prays to God, do not abandon me in my old age. Do not abandon me in my old age. That reflects the fact that in so many societies, people are abandoned at their old age. And thank you in this business, in this industry, not only for not abandoning the elderly, but for making the quality of their life till the end of their life something that you all should be very proud of. So thank you.